Russia recently hosted the 16th Brics summit under the shadow of its war in Ukraine and much concerns over its enlisting of North Korea in its military campaign against Kyiv. We have details on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective, our panel session with members of the press as well as pundits on issues of interest largely pertaining to South Korea. It's Monday today and time for our talk on defense and diplomatic matters affecting this particular part of the world in light of the latest Brics summit in Russia. For more on this, I have Michelle Lee, the Washington Post bureau chief for Seoul as well as neighboring Tokyo here in the studio. Michelle, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I also have Doctor Ban Kil Joo at Ilmin International Relations Institute of Korea University live on the line. Dr. Ban, welcome back.
Hello, good to be with you.
Right, Michelle, we'll start here in the studio. Let's start off with some background information about the Brics group. So who are they? What do they want and how successful have they been thus far?
So BRICS stands for a group of countries that are largely gathered to counter the Western-led global order and to present an alternative one with Russia and China in a leading role. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And there are also several other nations that are a part of this bloc, including Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE, and other countries that are participatories in it, but not formal members of the bloc. Russia and China see this group as an important one in their joint effort to challenge the U.S.-led global order, basically saying that they don't necessarily have to abide by America's rules on how countries should interact and operate. And they want to expand this membership as much as possible to increase its influence. Other members like India and Brazil are not necessarily as anti-Western led global rule. They're more looking to enhance the influence of the Global South and make sure that the Global South countries have an alternative to America and have other options as partners who can help them expand their national interest. So there's a little bit of tension here in how these countries interact within the BRICS bloc and what they hope to accomplish.
Right. Dr. Ban, keeping in mind the current geopolitical environment, how important is the BRICS grouping in your view?
Well, I would say that BRICS expands its clout not simply regionally, but globally in its geopolitical sense. Moreover, BRICS has recently gained pace, not only as an economic entity, but also as a growing political player. BRICS was originally created to offset the Western-led international economy, which was possible under key bodies like IMF and the World Bank. But its area of concern has been expanded thanks to a changing international order. In more detail, under this new corridor order, there are new big leagues. One is the League of Democracy, and the other is the League of Autocracy. G7 serves as a key mechanism to represent the League of Democracy around the world in a situation where the UN Security Council has been deadlocked. Meanwhile, expanding BRICS plays a counterweight role against G7. In this sense, these two leagues are becoming more competitive, not only economically, but also politically. When it comes to economic implications, BRICS could serve as an optimal platform to engage in the discourse of changing the global supply chain, which has been so far led by the Western League, particularly G7. Moreover, the fact that BRICS was hosted by Russia this time could help send a message to the world that Russia is not isolated on the diplomatic stage and that the Western-led sanctions against Russia are neither meaningful nor effective. With respect to geopolitical implications, Russia is most likely to have taken advantage of this platform to justify the Russia-Ukraine war and seize the initiative of winning the war by weakening the consistent support of international society for Ukraine. Furthermore, Russia seemed to expect this BRICS meeting to cover up the deployment of North Korean troops in the war to support Russia in a situation where international society shows its growing concern about this fact. Finally, as BRICS is expanding and serves as a counter player to G7, the global south is gaining momentum because both leagues try their best to police this body, where it is on the side of neither the League of Democracy nor the League of Autocracy, under the concept of strategic ambiguity, often referred to as a strategic autonomy.
Right then, keeping in mind what Dr. Ban has just said, Michelle, if I were to ask you to highlight some of the gains for Mr. Putin from this latest BRICS summit, what would you choose to highlight?
So actually, when you read the final communique from the summit, there aren't that many concrete details or timelines of deliverables or any sort of concrete plans. In fact, the most interesting outcome of the summit may have not been about Putin at all. It may have been the meeting between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who had not held formal talks for 5 years. But nonetheless, I think it was an important messaging opportunity for Putin. It was definitely a symbolic win for him. It helped him reinforce this message that you can't isolate Russia just in the way that the West wants to do. And like Dr. Ban said about being a counterweight to G7, it gave Putin to host this largest geopolitical event that it had hosted since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And ever since the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for his arrest on war crimes charges, it has been rare for Putin to hold bilateral meetings and have such conversations with his counterparts in other countries. But at BRICS, he was able to hold multiple bilateral meetings. And he actually made a big deal about it when he was talking to reporters, like, oh, I'm so busy. I have many, many bilateral meetings at this summit. And Putin sees this group as a key tool in his plan to challenge the US-led global dominance and to destroy the power of the American dollar, which is also what China has been wanting. And Putin wants to show that the West has failed in isolating him. And in fact, he has a lot of friends on the global stage, and they're all willing to get together to talk about similar interests, and that he's an important player. So Russia happened to host the annual BRICS summit this year, and it came at the right time for him and gave him an opportunity to project his anti-West message and project that he's still an important player on the global stage.
Right, and keeping in mind what Michelle has just said about Mr. Putin seeking to portray the image that he is still relevant in the global political stage, diplomatic stage that is, Dr. Ban, what are your thoughts regarding UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' decision to attend this year's BRICS summit?
To be honest with you, his attendance is controversial indeed. In the meantime, I will say that there are pros and cons to his decision. If so, which is good and which is bad? Let me take a look at the pro side first. The UN Secretary General has 3 big duties under the UN body: human rights, development, and peace. Meanwhile, these duties are hard to achieve in the divided world. In this sense, his attendance serves as an active role in making communications with all sides in the divided world. Similarly, his attendance could be defined as an effort to mitigate the new corridor mechanism. When it comes to the con side, 2 things are raised: a rules-based order and the UN function. First, his attendance is controversial and bad for preserving a rules-based order, in the sense that Russia invaded Ukraine and made a treaty with North Korea, which turned out to violate international rules. Despite this rules-breaking behavior, Putin hosted this event without any interruptions, which is not a positive sign for preserving a rules-based order. Second, his attendance could accelerate the deadlocked UN functions because it could be seen as an act not to punish Russia, leading to making the UN more dysfunctional. Russia was supposed to guarantee a full function of the UN Security Council as one of its 5 permanent members. However, Russia has taken advantage of its right of veto in the UN Security Council to maximize its national interests. In this vein, his attendance could send a misguided signal that the UN is out of the stage in this new order, and there is no problem for Russia to continue its revisionist attempts. All in all, I have to say that his attendance is more harm than good in terms of timing and venue. The timing is not good because Russia-Ukraine war continues to go on without any sign of negotiation. His attendance is not positively recommended either in terms of the venue, in the sense that the host country was Russia, which breaks the international rules.
Right. And Michelle, moving forward, now apart from speaking to reporters about how he has as many friends or more friends than foes, Mr. Putin also refrained from confirming nor denying the presence of North Korean soldiers in Russia for training. But he did insist that the matter itself was only up to Russia and North Korea. What are some of your takeaways from Putin's remarks?
I thought it was so interesting because Putin very clearly did not deny the presence of North Korean troops in Russia. And in fact, it was sort of like a vague acknowledgement. You know, he was asked about the findings by the South Korean NIS about the North Korean troops in Russia. And when he was asked about the satellite images, he said, quote, "Images are a serious thing. If there are images, they reflect something," unquote. And, you know, then he invoked the fact that Russia and North Korea has signed this mutual defense pact over the summer. And a few days later, North Korea also gave sort of a fuzzy statement. And the vice foreign minister said that if this quote unquote rumor of troops in Russia is true, then it will be an act conforming with the regulations of international law. So basically saying that we're not confirming the rumor, but if it were true, then it's legal, it's fine. My colleagues and I at the Washington Post have been verifying these social media videos of North Korean troops in Russia. And we have located the troops filmed in the videos to a military training complex in Sergivka, which is along the North Korea-Russia border. And you can hear soldiers who appear to be of Korean descent speaking in what appears to be North Korean accent. And it seems to support claims from the US, Ukraine, and South Korea that these troops are already in the region, that they're being geared up to possibly deploy in the fight against Ukraine. And it seems like North Korea and Russia aren't flatly denying it either. You know, they're not confirming it, but they're not saying this is absolutely untrue. And from their perspective, it seems that whatever they're doing on this front is a furtherance of their military cooperation, of this mutual defense pact that they signed together this summer, and that it's a deepening of their relationship to come to each other's defense if they're attacked.
Right, and staying with this military cooperation between North Korea and Russia, Dr. Ban, first Ukrainian intelligence and then South Korean intelligence confirmed North Korean troop deployment for training in Russia. The US, for its part, initially appeared reserved, if you will, about confirming nor denying the deployment. How do you explain this initial stance?
Well, at first glance, South Korea and Ukraine are better placed to gather information and intelligence faster than others due to their geographical advantages. That could be one of the reasons why these two countries confirmed faster than others. However, there are more complex and significant reasons as well. I would say that South Korea and Ukraine are more influenced by the growing dynamic of international security, which is a geopolitical convergence. Regional security crisis is not confined to the region any longer, but it is converging into another regional security. This linkage is defined as geopolitical convergence. The dispatch of North Korean troops to the Eurasian battlefield allowed geopolitical convergence to not only be faster, but become policies beyond the discourse. What matters is that South Korea and Ukraine are under the greater and more direct impact of geopolitical convergence to North Korean forces dispatch. Thus, South Korea and Ukraine are in a more critical moment than others. That explains why both South Korea and Ukraine confirmed North Korean troops deployment faster than others. If so, what made the United States to be reluctant to confirm North Korean forces dispatch at a fast tempo? First of all, the Biden administration was in a position to examine more carefully what was happening there before it would be confirmed officially due to its domestic politics, which is the presidential race, as you are well aware. North Korean troops deployment could be defined as a policy failure of the current administration. So under the tight race, the Biden administration appeared to be more careful of confirming its fact. Second, if the United States confirms North Korean troops dispatch, it should lay out its countermeasures, such as more sanctions against Russia and North Korea, and another support package for Ukraine. The United States might have needed more time to come up with effective and durable countermeasures.
Perhaps expanding further on what Dr. Ban has just said, Michelle, there are other observers here in the country who claim that the initial cautious stance by the Biden administration had much to do with domestic politics in the U.S. rather than any doubt or misgiving about the intelligence provided by its allies. What do you say?
So I know that it took the U.S. longer than the South Koreans and Ukrainians wanted to come out and confirm the presence of North Korean troops in Russia, but I'm not sure if it's true that it was driven by domestic political misgivings. Because first of all, foreign policy is not a decider in the U.S. presidential election. You know, it's a very tight race for the president right now between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but to the extent that, you know, there's a single issue that brings people to the polls or makes them vote on an issue one way or another, it is very, very rarely foreign policy. And at the moment, it's not necessarily Ukraine. The most divisive foreign policy issue at the moment is Israel-Gaza in the U.S. And where the U.S. comes out on the presence of North Korean troops in Russia is not necessarily going to be a swaying factor in the presidential election. Nor have, you know, grave consequences in the current political debate over foreign policy decisions by the Biden administration. So I'm not sure that that is the deciding factor. Based on my reporting and the reporting by my colleagues, talking to U.S. officials, NATO officials, it did take them some time to examine very carefully the evidence at hand. Not just the evidence that the South Koreans and Ukrainians were providing, but independent assessments of what they were seeing as well in the U.S. and among the NATO officials. And I know that there was a lot of concern about what this could mean if the U.S. and, you know, other European officials came out and confirmed that North Korean troops were in fact planning to be deployed on behalf of Russia. And in fact, U.S. Still has not given a firm intent to the North Koreans who are training in Russia. The U.S. officials appear to still be hedging a little bit on their analysis. And I know that, you know, they see this as a potentially significant escalation in the war that could have huge implications beyond this region. And so it took some time for them to more slowly than Koreans wanted to assess the evidence at hand.
Right. Before the confirmation by U.S. authorities, Dr. Ban, U.S. Defense Secretary John Healey earlier said that it was, and I quote, shocking and desperate if North Korean soldiers are indeed fighting for Russia. Do you agree that this reality of North Korean troops being present in Russia for training to be deployed to Ukraine, does this reality reflect a sense of desperation on the part of Russia, Dr. Ban?
Well, let me give my takeaway from the perspectives of the two actors, European countries and Russia. On the one hand, North Korean soldiers' deployment could be shocking and desperate from the viewpoint of international society, which is eager to preserve a liberal international order against the revisionist attempts. In particular, European countries belong to this group stronger than others because this war is being made on their geopolitical front lines. Meanwhile, they were reluctant to directly participate in the war and instead decided to indirectly intervene in the war under the concept of proxy war. Why is that? It is because they do not want a wider regional war or a third world war. Their shock and desperation are based on the fact that their restraint did not fully weaken the possibility of a wider regional war due to the deployment of North Korean troops. Rather, their restraint allowed external actors, which is not related to the war geographically, to directly participate in the war, leading to stepping up the possibility of a wider regional war. Accordingly, they are in a more serious situation where they need to examine how to counter North Korean soldiers' dispatch, including their own way of soldiers' deployment. On the other hand, it is also true that the deployment reflects Russia's desperation because Putin would not have asked Kim Jong-un to send North Korean troops there if he had won the war early enough, according to his original plan. Putin was frustrated by his forces' incapability of winning the war amid an ongoing war of attrition. Russia had to ask for help even from a weaker actor, which is North Korea, because winning the war was recognized as the most necessary war to him. I would say that all these facts made Aloud both frustrated and desperate.
Right. That being said then, Michelle, South Korea up until now has kept its support for Ukraine to non-lethal assistance. Do you suppose the time has come for South Korea to shift its support plan for Ukraine, as of course the top office shared earlier?
I think it's natural for this debate to reemerge in the wake of the news of North Koreans being recruited by Russia. I think it's really interesting how the Korean Peninsula has become so central in this way to the fight between, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And South Korea does have a robust defense industry, and ever since 2022, it has been delivering arms to Poland, in particular K2 battle tanks and K9 self-propelled howitzers, which has allowed Warsaw to send its own equipment to Ukraine. And we know that South Korea has been backfilling the U.S. artillery supply as the U.S. sends its own, artilleries to Ukraine. But as you know, South Korean law bans the export of arms for anything but peaceful purposes. And South Korea has stopped short from giving lethal weapons directly to Ukraine. It is quite controversial still here in South Korea. And, now it appears that South Korean officials are openly talking about it as a potential as they consider how to respond to North Korean troops being in Russia. And, this is not South Korea's war to fight necessarily. It is a major ally of the U.S. But I do wonder, because considering how President Yoon envisions South Korea to be a global pivotal state, whether it is time to have this robust debate around the South Korean law and make it a public discussion.
Right then, while South Korea ponders the possibility of sending lethal weapons to Ukraine, Dr. Ban, what, in the meantime, are the gains for Kim Jong-un by deploying North Korean soldiers to support the Russian warfare in Ukraine?
Well, the gains that Kim Jong-un is expected to have can be explained by two deals: economic deals and strategic deals. When it comes to the economic deal, North Korea is expected to not only make money, but also seek food and oil in exchange for soldiers' dispatch. North Korean soldiers are defined not as real ally soldiers, but as mercenaries who make money for their deployment. In fact, Moscow appears to pay money to Pyongyang for the deployment of North Korean soldiers. Moreover, North Korean troops dispatch allows Russia to provide food and oil to North Korea. This economic deal helps neutralize sanctions against North Korea, which is necessary to achieve the final goal of its nuclear weapons program. When it comes to strategic deal, North Korea is most likely to gain strategic technology and weapons because dispatch means a high level of help for Russia on the front line, stepping up its leverage to Russia. If so, what would be on the wish list? Russia could transfer ICBM re-entry technology and the solid propellant ICBM, similar to Russia's Topol and ICBM. The wish list does not seem to stop there. Low-yield nuclear weapons, advanced SMBL, someone-launched ballistic missile technology, and nuclear-powered submarines are likely to be on the list. All in all, both deals are likely, but at the same time, how much these deals are made in practice depends on how many more North Korean troops are deployed on the front line and how well they fight there.
Right. In the meantime then, Michelle, what are your thoughts regarding the broader implications of the prolonged war in Ukraine, especially amid the growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia?
The growing military cooperation between North Korea and Russia is a major concern for the U.S. and its allies, especially because there's little to be done to stop it, directly that they can do to actually stop it from unfolding. For the United States and its partners, it raises troubling questions about this, to what extent North Korea and Russia are willing to cooperate, not just in this war, but potentially elsewhere. They are two nuclear-armed nations and longstanding U.S. adversaries, and where else are they willing to cooperate? U.S. officials have said the implications are far-reaching, not just in its impacts in Europe, but also potentially in the Indo-Pacific. It raises questions about what is the state of the Russians in this fight that they're waging against Ukrainians to be leaning on North Koreans like this, not just on troops, but also weapons that are not always the most reliable that are coming over from North Korea to Russia. Perhaps Russia is truly facing critical shortages in manpower. And it also raises questions about what the Kim regime is getting from Russia, just as Dr. Ban just mentioned regarding the economic and strategic gains that North Korea might be getting. It seems like perhaps Kim sees that there's enough to gain from this deal with Russia to the point where he's willing to send his own citizens into potentially the line of fire. Asian countries, especially in Japan, which I also cover, are watching the war in Ukraine very closely about what it could mean for this region, what it could mean in the case of a potential invasion of Taiwan by China, and the broader implications that it could have for the security and the security dynamics in this region. With North Koreans getting into the mix to support by sending its own people to a war that it ideologically supports, it raises the stakes of how one conflict could bleed over into another and how it could draw in other countries in this region and perhaps even ultimately the Korean Peninsula.
Right, hence the fears of a potential wider war in the future, which hopefully will not be the case, of course. Michelle, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today. And Dr. Ban, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, on that note, we end Monday's edition of Press Perspective. See you same time tomorrow.